Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance is a prequel series to Jim Henson's 1982 cult classic, The Dark Crystal. And this is kind of a origin story for the planet of Thra, and it focuses on its two most prominent species, the evil and benevolent Skeksis, and the kind, good-hearted Gelflings. Now this review won't contain any spoilers, but I am going to kind of talk extensively about some of the more important aspects of the series. And also, if you're a fan of the original Dark Crystal, you'll probably like this review. If you're not a fan of the Dark Crystal, then this review isn't for you. When I was growing up, I wasn't that much of a fan of the Dark Crystal. I was much more of a fan of Jim Henson's Labyrinth. Still am. Still kind of holding out for a sequel for that one. I mean, I did like the Dark Crystal, but not as much as I liked the other. Now, a sequel to the Dark Crystal has been in developmental hell pretty much since 1982 when the first one debuted, and it took 27 years for this prequel series to come out. Now prequels are always really hard, and they're kind of difficult for me to kind of get behind, because prequels, no matter what, you always know what's going to happen. It's like the Star Wars prequel trilogy. You know that Anakin Skywalker is going to turn into Darth Vader. So if you have seen the Dark Crystal, you know at the beginning of Dark Crystal, the planet Thra is kind of in despair. The Skeksis are kind of ruling, and the Gelflings are all but obliterated, all save for two. So when this prequel series came out and it said that it was the Age of Resistance, the Gelflings were going to rise up against the Skeksis, you just kind of thought, well, I know this isn't going to turn out well. So this was really difficult for me to get behind. And I was kind of weary when they said that it was going to be season 1, and there will probably be multiple seasons coming after it, directly leading into the Dark Crystal. I was like, how much can you really put into this series? Now it starts off with the narrator, whose voice is Sigourney Weaver, which I thought was a brilliant casting decision, telling about the kind of origins of Thra and how the Skeksis came to power. How the Skeksis just kind of showed up on the planet and kind of took over, and everybody looks at them as kind of like lords and gods and kings, and how everyone kind of like brings them tithings, brings them their offerings to be in their good light. Now, one thing I have a problem with is if someone told me that this was my Lord and Master, I would not be thankful to be in its presence. I mean, does that look like the face of something that you want to hug or kind of stand next to? I bet it smells terrible. So all the Gelflings kind of like really bask in being in the presence of the Skeksis. They're like so honored to be with them. They're so honored to ask them questions, to just kind of be around them. And right then I call bullshit. But in the first episode, you kind of see the Skeksis' true intentions. They harness the power of the Dark Crystal to give them immortality. And to kind of get by, they kind of make do with the offerings that the Gelflings give them. And when one of the main characters kind of witnesses what they're doing, that's where the series kind of starts to take off. And you kind of see what leads to this rebellion that they're kind of building up to. So for the review itself, I'm going to come right out and say that this series was good. It wasn't great, but it was still pretty good. And I'll just go ahead and jump right into what I liked and what I didn't like about it. First off, the good. The casting in this is phenomenal. I mean, they picked great voice actors. We got Jason Isaac, Simon Pegg, Benedict Wong, Helena Bonham Carter. We just got so many good actors for this. Like I said, Sigourney Weaver is the narrator, and that was just brilliant. Like I said, if you've seen the original Dark Crystal, you know those Skeksis kind of have the high-pitched, kind of raspy voice though, and all the voice actors had to do that for their character. The thing about it though is they all kind of sound similar, so unless you actually watch the credits and look at the cast list, you won't know who is who. And some of the Skeksis do look a lot alike, so I couldn't tell what characters were important, which ones weren't. Oh, Simon Pegg does the voice of this one. Who is he? And then you kind of like, as the series goes on, you kind of realize which one he is and all the Skeksis' different roles. But it takes a minute for that to get going. And I thought the Gelflings voice cast was really good too. You got Taron Egerton as one of the voices. Anya Taylor-Joy, she did really well in it. All the voice casting was superb in this. I was so thrilled when I found out that this was going to be traditional puppetry, because I am a huge Jim Henson fan. Like I said, I love Labyrinth. And I love all the Muppet movies, you know? I love the Muppet TV show. I'm just a huge fan of that, and I love seeing what they can do next. And the puppetry in this is just flawless. Well, not so flawless. There are some great scenes with the puppetry in there. There are some scenes where you are kind of like, I can tell that was kind of on a rod. I can tell that was someone just kind of moving sticks, you know. But for the most part, the principal characters, they all looked great. You can watch a scene, and after a while, you kind of tend to forget that you're watching puppets. I think the combination with the puppetry and the voice cast, you kind of forget that you're watching these mystical creatures that are just created by this, you know? Now, with that being said, the principal characters, they all look really great. But I think a lot of the time and energy of the creators and the puppeteers went into those characters, and some of the secondary characters kind of suffered. Some of the minor characters, you can really tell that those are puppets, and you can't really think that with the main characters. Like I said, you forget that you're watching puppets sometimes. Now, a good majority of this, I'd say probably 95% of this, was done with real puppets. So there is some CGI in there, but that CGI was flawless. I mean, that blended really well with the puppets, with the sets, with the backgrounds. Speaking of which, I want to talk about the director of the series, Louis Leterrier. When I found out he was going to be the director, I was kind of like on edge with it. Because even though I do like some of his stuff, like The Incredible Hulk, I'm not a huge fan of his, so I really wondered if this franchise was going to be in the right hands. But he did it really well. He knew what fans of the Dark Crystal wanted, because he himself is a fan of the Dark Crystal. He is a good director of action sequences, so the action sequences in this series are done really well, considering that they are with puppets, and, you know, it's things on rods that are just kind of being thrown around like that. But for the most part, he did make them believable. One of the things that always interests me about the original The Dark Crystal was that there were scenes that were really dark and scary in it, and I was wondering if they were going to kind of keep that aspect of it in this new series, and they do. There are some scenes that are really dark. When characters die, you are just kind of like, whoa, that was a little much. This really does feel that they were trying to kind of harness the Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. There are different places in here that it's kind of hard to keep track of, because they all have weird names. There's different tribes. I don't really know how to put this, but it's just, it has a very Lord of the Rings feel to it. So it is kind of confusing having to figure out, okay, this tribe does this, okay, this part of the world is all about this. These Gelflings are different from these Gelflings, and it is kind of jumbled a little bit, but after a while you do kind of tend to recognize certain aspects of Thra. One negative thing I do have to say about this is this was a huge undertaking, and they crammed it all into 10 episodes, and each episode is an hour long. I don't really know if a prequel to The Dark Crystal really deserved a 10-hour series. If you look at Star Wars and the prequel trilogies, you figure those were about 2 hours, so you had 6 hours of movie before you got to the original trilogy. This is 10-hour prequel before 1 hour-and-a-half movie. It just felt like it was a little much. There were aspects of it that really could have been taken out that didn't really need to be explored. This is going to be a series that is essentially about the Gelflings being wiped out and the Skeksis rise to being the rulers of Thra. So there was stuff in there that you really didn't need. There are some episodes where I was just kind of sitting there like, is this over? Are we done yet? Can I click the next episode? So to kind of do a quick recap of the series, The Good. It looks amazing. The backgrounds, the sets, the locations, the puppets, the costume design, all of that looks amazing. The voice acting is superb. Probably one of the best voice acting casts I've ever seen. The portrayal from the puppets was amazing. I mean, you genuinely felt care and love for some of these characters and hatred for others. Now for the bad parts of it. It was long. There are a lot of things that can be cut from it. It can be kind of confusing with so many different parts of the world, so many different clans, and so many weird, kind of strange names. So the good and the bad kind of even itself out. I'm going to give the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, watch it. If it comes up in your suggested movies, give it a watch. Thanks for watching. Be sure to comment below with your review of Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. For more on what you should watch and what you should skip on Netflix, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon. And as always, I will see you in the next episode.